The story of Rome is one of the most captivating narratives in human history. Few civilizations have left behind such an enduring mark on law, politics, architecture, military strategy, literature, and culture as the Romans. The Roman Empire, at its height, stretched from the windswept moors of Britain to the sands of Egypt, from the Iberian Peninsula in the west to the rivers of Mesopotamia in the east. It lasted for centuries, and even in its collapse, Rome's shadow continued to influence the medieval world and the very foundations of modern Western civilization. But the Roman story did not begin with emperors, marble palaces, and vast armies. It began with myths, humble villages, and a struggle for survival in a world dominated by more powerful neighbors. To understand how Rome rose to greatness and why it eventually fell, we must first return to its legendary origins. According to Roman tradition, the city was founded in 753 BCE. The tale begins with twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, sons of the Vestal Virgin Rhea Silvia and the war god Mars. Condemned at birth, the twins were abandoned on the banks of the Tiber River to die. Instead, fate intervened. A she-wolf, or lupa, nursed them until a shepherd found and raised them. As adults, the brothers decided to establish a city. Disagreement soon arose over where and how it should be built. In the quarrel that followed, Romulus killed Remus and became the sole founder of Rome. He named the city after himself and began the line of kings who would rule in its earliest days. While modern historians treat this as myth rather than fact, the story carried deep symbolic meaning for the Romans. It reflected values of strength, survival, and destiny. Rome, they believed, was not just another city. It was a city chosen by the gods, born in blood, and destined for greatness. The legend of Romulus and Remus also revealed something about Roman culture. Violence, fraternal conflict, and divine favor were part of their worldview. These themes would echo throughout Roman history, from civil wars between generals to the assassination of leaders. After Romulus, tradition speaks of 6 more kings who ruled the fledgling settlement. These kings were not all Romans by birth. Some were of Sabine or Etruscan origin, neighboring peoples who influenced Rome profoundly. Each king contributed to the shaping of the city. Numa Pompilius, for example, was remembered for his wisdom and for establishing many of Rome's religious and legal institutions. Tullus Hostilius emphasized military expansion, while Ancus Marcius worked on infrastructure such as bridges and fortifications. The last 3 kings, Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus, were heavily influenced by Etruscan culture. The Etruscans, a sophisticated people north of Rome, brought advances in architecture, engineering, and religion. Under these kings, Rome grew in size and complexity, transitioning from a collection of huts to an organized city. Temples were built, the Cloaca Maxima, one of the world's earliest sewage systems, was constructed, and social structures began to take shape. But monarchy in Rome ended violently. Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, ruled as a tyrant. His arrogance and abuse of power led to widespread resentment. According to legend, his son committed an atrocity against a noblewoman named Lucretia, which sparked outrage among the Roman nobility. In 509 BCE, the people of Rome rose up, expelled Tarquin, and swore never again to be ruled by kings. Thus began the Roman Republic. The expulsion of the monarchy was a defining moment. Rome's new system of government sought to balance power and prevent tyranny. Authority was divided between different institutions: the Senate, an assembly of aristocratic elders, and 2 annually elected consuls who shared executive power. In times of crisis, a dictator could be appointed, but only for a limited term. This system of checks and balances became one of Rome's greatest political innovations and inspired future generations, including the framers of the United States Constitution. Yet the Republic was far from perfect. Power lay primarily in the hands of the patricians, the wealthy aristocratic class. Ordinary citizens, the plebeians, had little say in governance. Over time, this inequality sparked conflict between the two classes, known as the conflict of the orders. Plebeians fought for rights and representation, achieving gradual reforms such as the creation of the tribune of the plebs, an official who could veto decisions harmful to commoners. The publication of the 12 Tables, Rome's first written code of law, was another victory, ensuring that laws were no longer kept secret by the elite. This constant negotiation between classes gave Rome a flexibility many ancient states lacked. While not fully democratic, the Republic allowed space for adaptation and compromise, which contributed to its resilience. Rome's early years were spent consolidating power in central Italy. The city was surrounded by rival peoples, the Etruscans to the north, the Sabines in the hills, and the Latins in neighboring towns. Through a combination of warfare, alliances, and diplomacy, Rome gradually extended its influence. By the 4th century BCE, Rome had become the dominant power in the Italian peninsula. One of its key strengths was the way it integrated conquered peoples. Instead of annihilating them, Rome often offered varying degrees of citizenship or alliance, binding them into its system. This created loyalty and manpower for future campaigns, but expansion was not without hardship. The invasion of the Gauls in 390 BCE nearly destroyed Rome. The city was sacked, its temples burned, and its people humiliated. Yet Rome recovered with determination, rebuilding stronger walls and reforming its army. This resilience became a hallmark of Roman character. Setbacks were temporary, and every defeat was treated as a lesson for future success. Rome's rise in Italy was only the beginning. As its influence expanded beyond the peninsula, it soon found itself drawn into conflicts with other powerful civilizations. Chief among these was Carthage, a maritime empire based in North Africa. The clash between Rome and Carthage would come to define much of the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE, shaping the destiny of the Republic and setting the stage for future empire. The Punic Wars, named after the Latin word punicus for Phoenician, were fought between Rome and Carthage across more than a century. They represented not just military contests, but struggles for control of the Mediterranean world. The First Punic War, 264 to 241 BCE, began over disputes in Sicily, a strategically vital island. Carthage was a naval superpower, while Rome had little maritime experience. Yet the Romans adapted with remarkable ingenuity. They constructed a fleet, copied from a captured Carthaginian ship, and invented the corvus, a boarding device that turned sea battles into land-like encounters where Roman infantry excelled. After years of bloody struggle, Rome emerged victorious, seizing Sicily as its first province. This marked the Republic's transformation into an overseas power. The Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BCE, was one of the most dramatic conflicts of antiquity. It is remembered above all for the brilliant Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca. In an audacious move, Hannibal led his army, including war elephants, across the Alps into Italy. At battles such as Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and most famously Cannae, he inflicted devastating defeats on the Romans. At Cannae in 216 BCE, Hannibal's smaller army encircled and annihilated a much larger Roman force, killing tens of thousands in a single day. It was one of the greatest tactical masterpieces in history. Rome, however, did not collapse. The Republic's resilience once again shone through. Instead of surrendering, it mobilized fresh legions, avoided direct confrontation with Hannibal when possible, and struck at Carthage's holdings elsewhere. Eventually, under the leadership of Publius Cornelius Scipio, later known as Scipio Africanus, the Romans carried the war to North Africa. At the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE, Scipio defeated Hannibal, forcing Carthage to sue for peace. Rome now stood as the undisputed master of the Western Mediterranean. The Third Punic War, 149 to 146 BCE, was less a military necessity and more an act of ruthless dominance. Though Carthage had been weakened, some Romans, particularly Cato the Elder, insisted it must be destroyed. The war culminated in the brutal siege of Carthage. After fierce fighting, the city was burned, its inhabitants killed or enslaved, and its land allegedly salted to prevent future habitation. Whether the salting story is literal or symbolic, the message was clear: Carthage was no more. Rome now reigned supreme in the West. With Carthage destroyed, Rome turned its attention eastward. The Hellenistic kingdoms that had followed the breakup of Alexander the Great's empire, Macedonia, Greece, and the Seleucid Empire, became the next targets. Rome intervened in Greek affairs under the guise of liberating the cities, but liberation soon turned into domination. Victories at Cynocephaly, 197 BCE, and Pydna, 168 BCE, dismantled Macedonian power. The Seleucid king Antiochus III was defeated at Magnesia in 190 BCE. By the mid-2nd century BCE, Rome effectively controlled the entire Mediterranean basin, earning the name Mare Nostrum, our sea. The conquest of Greece brought immense cultural influence. Roman elites were captivated by Greek philosophy, art, and literature. Greek tutors educated Roman children, Greek architects and sculptors transformed Roman cities. And Greek ideas seeped into Roman religion and politics. Yet while Rome admired Greek culture, it never forgot its military superiority. The Romans saw themselves as the masters who had conquered the very people they revered. Rome's success, however, brought new challenges. With victory came wealth, slaves, and vast territories. But these riches were not distributed equally. The aristocracy grew immensely powerful, controlling land and political offices, while small farmers and ordinary citizens often struggled. The influx of slaves displaced free labor, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the city. Rome's political system, designed for a city-state, was straining under the weight of empire. One of the earliest signs of trouble came with the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, in the 2nd century BCE. Both attempted reforms to redistribute land and address inequality. Their efforts, however, threatened the interests of the Senate and the elite. Both brothers were violently killed, setting a precedent for political violence in Rome. This was a turning point. Disagreements were no longer resolved purely through law and debate, but through bloodshed. At the same time, Rome's military was evolving. The traditional army of citizen soldiers, who fought for the Republic and then returned to their farms, gave way to professional legions loyal to their generals. Reforms by Gaius Marius in the late 2nd century BCE allowed landless citizens to enlist, creating armies that looked to their commanders, not the Senate, for reward. This shift laid the foundation for future civil wars, as ambitious generals could wield military power to pursue political dominance. As the 1st century BCE unfolded, internal strife escalated. The Social War, 91 to 88 BCE, fought against Rome's Italian allies who demanded citizenship, revealed the tensions within Rome's system. Though the allies were eventually granted citizenship, the conflict weakened the Republic and militarized politics further. Meanwhile, generals such as Lucius Cornelius Sulla marched on Rome itself, something once unthinkable. Sulla's dictatorship in the 80s BCE demonstrated that force could override law, and his proscriptions, lists of enemies marked for death, terrorized the political class. Rome had entered an era where the sword increasingly dictated power. The Mediterranean also remained unstable. Pirates disrupted trade, and rebellious provinces challenged Roman authority. Yet Rome's biggest threats were not external but internal. The ambitions of powerful men, Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar, set the stage for a republic at war with itself. By the time Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE, the republic was already crumbling. What had begun as a city founded by myth, nurtured through resilience, and expanded through genius, was on the verge of transforming into something entirely new, an empire ruled not by senators and consuls, but by emperors. By the 1st century BCE, Rome had become the most powerful force in the Mediterranean. It had destroyed Carthage, humbled Greece, and absorbed much of the Hellenistic world. Its armies dominated from Spain to Asia Minor, and its wealth poured into the capital. Yet behind the facade of glory, the Roman Republic was crumbling under the weight of its own success. Social inequality, political corruption, and the rise of ambitious generals were slowly pulling the system apart. The republic that had once prided itself on shared governance and civic duty was sliding toward dictatorship and civil war. Few figures embody this transition more than Gaius Julius Caesar. Born in 100 BCE to a patrician family, Caesar combined political genius, charisma, and unmatched ambition. His early years were marked by both setbacks and triumphs. He rose through the ranks of Roman politics, aligning himself with powerful figures such as Pompey the Great and Marcus Licinius Crassus. Together they formed what historians call the First Triumvirate, an informal alliance that dominated Roman politics in the 50s BCE. Caesar's true rise to fame, however, came through military conquest. As governor of Gaul, he embarked on a decade-long campaign that expanded Rome's territory to the English Channel and the Rhine River. His commentaries on the Gallic War not only chronicled his victories but also served as propaganda, showcasing his brilliance and courage. The conquest of Gaul made Caesar immensely wealthy and gave him the loyalty of hardened legions. He was no longer just a politician, he was a warlord with an army devoted to him personally. The Senate, alarmed at his growing power, ordered Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. To obey meant humiliation and likely political ruin. To resist meant civil war. In 49 BCE, Caesar made his choice. Crossing the small river Rubicon with his army, he famously declared, "Alia iacta est," the die is cast. With that step, Caesar marched on Rome, defying the Senate and igniting civil conflict. The civil war that followed pitted Caesar against Pompey, his former ally. Pompey, supported by much of the Senate, fled to Greece. Caesar pursued him relentlessly, defeating him at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE. Pompey fled to Egypt, only to be assassinated upon arrival. Caesar, outraged by the dishonorable act, nevertheless used the opportunity to involve himself in Egyptian politics. It was here he met Cleopatra VII, the charismatic queen of Egypt. Their alliance, political and romantic, would produce a son and further enhance Caesar's legend. Returning to Rome, Caesar consolidated his power. He defeated remaining opposition in North Africa and Spain, emerging as the unrivaled master of the Roman world. In 46 BCE, he was appointed dictator, first for 10 years and later for life. He initiated sweeping reforms, revising the calendar, creating the Julian calendar still recognizable today, restructuring debts, expanding the Senate and launching ambitious building projects, yet Caesar's growing authority alarmed many senators. To them, the Republic was dying. The idea of a lifelong dictator was too close to monarchy, the very system their ancestors had overthrown centuries earlier. A conspiracy began to form. On March 15, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, Caesar entered the Senate chamber. Unaware of the full scope of the conspiracy, he was surrounded by senators who pretended to greet him. Suddenly, daggers flashed. Caesar was stabbed 23 times by men he had considered allies, including Brutus, whom he regarded almost as a son. According to legend, Caesar's final words were "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" Though historians debate the accuracy of this detail, the assassination was meant to save the Republic. Instead, it plunged Rome into chaos. The conspirators underestimated Caesar's popularity and the loyalty of his legions. Far from restoring liberty, they unleashed a new wave of civil wars that would end the Republic forever. In the power vacuum that followed, two figures emerged: Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted general and ally, and Gaius Octavius, Caesar's 18-year-old adopted heir, better known as Octavian. Initially, Antony and Octavian, along with Marcus Lepidus, formed the second triumvirate to defeat Caesar's assassins. At the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE, Brutus and Cassius, the chief conspirators, were defeated and committed suicide. The triumvirate soon fractured. Lepidus was sidelined, and rivalry between Antony and Octavian grew bitter. Antony allied with Cleopatra of Egypt, intertwining Roman politics with Eastern ambitions. Octavian capitalized on Roman fears, portraying Antony as a man corrupted by Egyptian luxury and foreign influence. The propaganda war culminated in open conflict. At the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, Octavian's fleet, commanded by his brilliant admiral Agrippa, decisively defeated Antony and Cleopatra. The lovers fled to Egypt, where they took their own lives as Octavian's forces closed in. With their deaths, Octavian stood alone as master of Rome. In 27 BCE, Octavian took the title Augustus, becoming the first Roman emperor. Though he maintained the outward forms of the Republic, Senate, consuls, assemblies, the reality was clear: supreme power now rested in the hands of one man. The Republic was gone. The Roman Empire had begun. The fall of the Roman Republic was not caused by a single event but by a series of interconnected problems. The concentration of wealth in the hands of the elite created inequality that reforms could not resolve. The loyalty of soldiers shifted from the state to their generals, enabling men like Caesar and Sulla to wield armies as tools of personal ambition. Political violence eroded trust in institutions. Ambitious leaders exploited divisions, while the Senate proved incapable of adapting to Rome's new role as a Mediterranean empire. In the end, the Republic collapsed because it could not balance expansion with stability, nor ambition with restraint. The ideals of shared governance gave way to the reality of autocracy. Rome had gained the world but lost its republic. The story of Rome's beginnings is a tale of survival, adaptation, and ambition. From the mythical brothers Romulus and Remus to the grandeur of the Republic's triumphs, Rome's early history reveals both its strengths and its fatal flaws. It was a civilization born of resilience and innovation, yet undone by its own success. As Augustus took power in 27 BCE, Rome entered a new phase. The Republic was dead, but the empire was rising. The next chapter would witness centuries of glory, from emperors like Augustus, Trajan, and Hadrian to the cultural achievements that still echo today. Yet even in its grandeur, the seeds of decline remained. Rome's story was far from over, it was only beginning.